All right. Welcome back, everybody, and to those online. What a great morning of learning we've already had, and now we have another great session for you guys to take in. It's going to be called "From Balanced Bikes to Mountain Bikes: Maintaining Momentum with Youth Cycling and Education." So, my name is Chaz Robinson. I am on the Outride team, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing this session and sharing more of the learning that we've gathered around youth cycling. So, in this session, we'll learn about youth bicycle programming and how it contributes to social, emotional, and cognitive health and outcomes among children and youth in particular, and what motivates students to continue riding beyond the school day. So, we'll start the session with a focus on our youngest riders. Our first presenter is Rick Holt. He's the co-founder of the Early Childhood Mobility Coalition, which is focused on the mobility of children 8 and younger. He also is a safe streets advocate and a League of American Bicyclists certified instructor. He has completed research on children's physical activity and traffic gardens and is currently focused on the benefits of children's play and intergenerational mobility, and kids also on balance bikes. After that, we'll hear from our very own Esther Walker, who you met earlier and know very well at this point. Esther oversees the research and evaluation initiatives at Outride and collaborates with a wide range of researchers and community organizers to better understand how cycling can help the youth in their communities become happier, healthier, and better individuals. Then we'll hear from Starla Murillo and Fletcher Dementiev. Starla is an incoming senior at the University of Redlands, where she's studying biology. This summer, she's working with Dr. Sean Wilson of Loma Linda University and through the University of Redlands undergraduate research program. She hopes to go on to medical school after graduation, and also Fletcher is a rising sophomore at Columbia University. He spent the last 2 years working with Dr. Sean Wilson at Loma Linda University through the apprenticeship bridge and to college and undergraduate training programs. His research includes health equity, lifestyle medicine, and healthcare management. Finally, we'll hear from Dr. Tristan Wallhead, a professor of physical education and physical education teacher education at the University of Wyoming in the Division of Kinesiology and Health. He conducts research on the effects of instructional models, such as sport education on student motivation, and to be able to participate in physical education and the connection to extracurricular physical activity opportunities. So, with all that, remember that you can ask questions via the Zoom Q&A section if you're online, and in person, just raise your hand and we'll find you to ask questions. So, without further ado, let's welcome our first speaker, Rick Holt, who I believe is joining us virtually.
Excellent. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. So I want to thank Outride and Specialized really for the focus on research for youth cycling, and especially inviting me to talk about this earlier age group, this 8 and younger. The Early Childhood Mobility Coalition really focuses on North America, even though we have contacts over in Europe and other countries. So the idea here is to get children started at an earlier age. Matter of fact, we encourage kids to get out there as early as 18 months and on balance bikes. There's different programs across the United States and internationally that do that. This is an interesting video I'd like to show you. If you could go cue that up and play this first one.
See how fast I can go. All right, you guys can go to the door. You have to go up the curb.
Okay,
Unless you can hop.
one. Other slide, please. First one. So the, back a couple, please. One more. Excellent. Yeah, there you go. So the idea here is I actually feel free. This is from a bunch of kids at one of the schools near Hood River, Oregon. And Megan Ramey, who's the Safe Routes to Schools manager, is out there with them. And you hear the I actually feel free from the kids that are riding. And I think that's what kids feel when they're out there. There's that freedom, there's that control, there's that independence that we're trying to get across. And for them, this is independent mobility or independence. And so feeling free, I had this experience when I was in 5th grade. So I was able to, because of the infrastructure where I lived, I could go out and bike to the theater, to the pool, to school, to my friend's house, deliver a paper, go to sports events. So the key for kids here is to get them out and have more experience to be independently mobile. But we've seen in that independence or the independent mobility go down over time. Matter of fact, Ralph Bueller from Virginia Tech in a paper in 2020, at least in the US, found that cycling for children 5 to 15 years old dropped 15% from 2001 to 2017. We're hoping we see a change in that, but that's a part where we have to be concerned about. And what is that kids aren't getting the availability to go out and bike? Is it infrastructure we talked earlier? Is it parental concern over safety? We at Early Childhood Mobility Coalition feel like it's the access, the equity, the inclusiveness that we have to provide, and in school bike education combined with extracurricular or outside groups providing additional training. So in that mind, and thinking about kids not having access to bikes, how do we make this happen? Next slide, please. So this one, top left, these are children from the DC public schools. They're involved with the bike education program there. On the top right is a bike bus from Alameda Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. Bottom right is balance bikes, and then the bottom left is the 2nd grade bike program out of DC public schools. So we're going to talk about all these in the discussion today in this earlier age group. What got me into this initially, looking at this bicycling and social emotional aspect of it, I was invited to ride with the 8-year-olds, the 2nd graders at DC public school as part of their 2nd grade bike program. All of their 2nd graders across the 70+ schools go through a bike education program, 6 lessons, and they end it with a biking in the park event. And so I was able to go out there and ride with the kids on city streets. These are 7 and 8-year-olds riding 3 to 5 miles to a park where we had lunch, they played games, then we biked back to the school. So that was the end event for their lesson. So part of what I wanted to do as a researcher is I wanted to get a longitudinal study started, look at the outcomes of the 2nd grade bike program. And because we're to date, over 20,000 kids in the District of Columbia have gone through the bike education program. It's a signature event for them. However, their director of PE had another plan for me, and she wanted me to look at balance bikes and preschoolers. The next slide, please. So funding for this, how can we actually look at this earlier group? The 2nd grade bike program had received donated bikes, but also they had received balance bikes for the younger age, but the bikes weren't being used. So the director of physical activity and health for District of Columbia Public Schools wanted me to look into getting funding and looking at how we could combine balance bikes with bike education. So working with my colleagues, Dr. Ellen Rogers and Dr. Carly Maltese, and then a colleague, Fanula Quinn from Discover Traffic Gardens, we put together a funding proposal for the DC Department of Transportation Vision Zero program. The idea, again, to teach kids safety, to work on their focus on maneuvering around the built environment. And so with that, we put together traffic gardens, which are miniature streetscapes. They're called safety towns, other names for them across the world internationally. We have about 190 of these traffic gardens now in the United States, but these were the first 2 to go into DC public schools. They're actually going to be going into all Seattle schools here shortly. So there's a lot of programs rolling out in the US to have more traffic gardens, but also the combination of the balance bike, because the balance bike is a wonderful tool for this age group, again, as young as 18 months to start learning how to ride, depending on size and ability. So these were for pre-K 3 to 4, and we started the program, and the idea, again, was to move forward with that. Next, please. So this, with the program, the research we were looking at, we want to introduce dramatic play, physical play, and challenging, or I call risky play. That's the research I look at among the play. But dramatic play, so they can do role playing, they can take on different parts of being in the built environment. Physical play, physical activity, Challenging, risky play, obviously, because this is where the social emotional aspects come in, either role playing and dramatic play, challenging, risky play, and seeing what their limits are. We introduced mini lessons. So there were 4 mini lessons of 5 to 8 minutes in length, because again, attention span with 3 and 4-year-olds is a little shorter. And we introduced felt board characters, and the felt board characters we used for the stories for the mini lessons are on the bottom right. And then the picture on top right was one of the students in the class that we looked at. She did that as part of the activities in the classroom. And then we had a song that they learned on. Each time we went through a session built on the previous one, they increased and built on the song as well. Next slide, please. So this was a qualitative research study working with 3 and 4-year-olds, a little different sometimes. But so it's a pre-K 4 classroom. We had worked with an early childhood educator who was keen on this. She was a very big supporter of biking. She biked and her kids biked. So we know we had a champion there. And we did observations both in the classroom during the mini lessons and the storytelling with the felt board characters in the song, and also with their activity centers, because there were characters and activities with each center that actually reinforced the lesson plans. And then we did video recording. We put microphones and recorders on the children, so we would listen to their self-talk when they were out in the traffic garden. A lot of times you get a lot of information. This comes from both the museum research and also some information looking at kids learning how to ski, and the self-talk they do there to help them move through there and feel safe and feel comfortable and confident. And then we did video recording as well, so we had to capture that. So you see on the bottom right, we would do the classroom experience, we would do the 5 to 8 minute lesson plan, and then there would be a transition. Moving them from the classroom to outdoors is always a fun event with 4-year-olds. The idea also had to be fitted with helmets, so you had to fit the children with helmets, which is an interesting event. And then we put them outside. You had to get the bikes out of the storage, and we put them onto the playground. At that point, we had the traffic garden, and they would be in the traffic garden for 10 minutes with guided practice using the information from the lesson we had just provided. And then they got 10 to 15 minutes of free play. So we wanted to watch them both with the guided practice and also afterwards to see how that worked out. Next slide, findings. So this was interesting. We did find quite an improvement in safety awareness around the lessons. For example, what to do when you come to a stop sign. That was an interesting learning for a lot of them. But the idea was you're on this mini streetscape, you come up on your bike, you stop the stop sign. And so that was figured out pretty quickly by many kids. There was, again, we might have had a couple of minor collisions, and they were able to walk through and discuss that with each other. But there was also the part of learning about what do you do when there's an intersection and there's 4-way stop. The kids weren't sure who should go first. So we went through that whole process of learning about how do you actually maneuver the roadway with other people out there. Physical activity definitely increased. They weren't using the balance bikes before. They were typically sitting around locked up, and we were able to set it up to where the kids would go out for this time period. And every time we showed up, obviously it was a big thrill for them because they were going outside to spend more time additional to the recess and playtime they had otherwise. From a social emotional standpoint, we had decision points within the traffic garden. And so you had kids being physically active, but you also had kids talking to each other. One of the things I really liked is we had a ramp. It was a 1-foot ramp that the kids could go over to get a little bit of speed coming down one side. And some kids weren't comfortable with that. You could see encouragement from their friends in getting over that particular ramp and being successful with that and building self-confidence. So that was a great social emotional timeframe. There was definitely more social interaction, not only among the students, but also the staff of the school, parents, and the community. And we saw quite a bit of what we talked about today. We were talking about the social interaction and conversations and the community involvement. Traffic gardens, kids in school, those things actually build a great opportunity for community interaction. And we've seen this not only in the DC project that we did, but I've seen it in other traffic gardens that we put together. I'm getting ready to put one in Dayton, Kentucky, where I live near Cincinnati. And it's going to be in a park. And the idea is the communities come out and embrace that traffic garden as something for their kids to use to learn how to be safe or to be active in the community. So I follow risky play is a way to get to psychosocial competency. And Dr. Marina Bersoni from the University of British Columbia is the person that I probably have linked onto to look at what she's done around parental concerns about safety. And also Dr. Ellen Sandsetter from Norway. And the idea is to look at how not only early childhood educators, but also parents look at this in a way that we can have kids have a little bit more risk. And that first quote is great: play at high speeds, such as fast game or tag, or riding a bike really fast. That encapsulates what goes on with kids and getting on a balance bike and getting better at moving along with that. And they pick up their feet, they start cruising along. I was out at an event this couple weeks ago, and it was raining outside, light rain, and we were on a sort of a basketball court, concrete area, and there was a child riding around really fast, and she slipped and skidded and fell, but she was okay. And my wife asked her if she was okay, and then she said to her, the young lady, that maybe you might want to slow down a little bit on the wet pavement. And she said, I only go fast. So the kids on bikes it's part of that locomotion. The locomotor skills is pretty important. But the other part is it's definitely a fundamental movement skill as well. So having cycling, having that challenge, having that risk is a great way to have kids interact, but also build their own self-confidence and that sort of sense of freedom as well. Now, balance bike research, up until about 2015, there wasn't a lot of information out there in the research area, either around balance bikes, traffic gardens, cycling of this age group, 8 and younger. And over the last few years, we've seen an uptick in that. First of all, we've seen cycling designated as a fundamental movement skill. So something that should be used at earlier age to give the kids the balance, the coordination, that feeling of confidence. But also Dr. Christine Merci out of Portugal and her colleagues have done a lot of work with the balance bikes in different educational opportunities. And they found that using a balance bike can actually get children on pedal bikes faster. That transition is easier. They're more confident. They move to a balance bike faster. I've used my own research subjects, my 4 granddaughters, to test this theory out. And the 3 of the 4 are now on pedal bikes. 2 at 5 years old, 1 at 4 years old. She was faster than her sibling. And the fact that that's research that Dr. Merci talked about is that your sibling is going to be challenged to actually ride a little bit earlier than the other sibling. So we see this happening. We see a great transition from balance bike to pedal bike, and balance bikes are great, but the key is having them as a fleet. A lot of times, many parents can't afford a balance bike, so having fleets in school or fleets in daycare or those type of settings, or somebody bringing them in from the outside can support this. That way parents don't have to buy an additional bike when the children move on to a pedal bike. So there are a number of bike programs across the US. Outride is the one we're talking, they hosting this along with Specialized. But so if you look at the 8 and younger group, it's pretty, it's a smaller group of people doing this work. There's a great program out of British Columbia, Kids on Wheels. That's the first slide you saw with the kids on their balance bikes. Maya Goldstein has put that together. It works with daycare and preschool. She has 8 different stations. It's a week long. And she encourages parents to be part of that effort too, because I think, as we talked in some earlier presentations, having parents part of this is pretty important as well. You see kindergarten, Strider's All Kids Bike program is out there now. Seattle's going to bring that into their schools. So they'll have all kids bike, balance bikes, and they'll have traffic gardens in all our schools in Seattle soon. The second grade DC public school program I talked about already. Cycle Kids, I need to correct this. It's 4th through 5th grade, not 3rd grade through 5th. And then Outride, of course, with 6th through 8th. A lot of this is around social emotional. We want to get kids physically active, but we also want them to grasp that development. And 3 and 4 year olds, that's a key time for them to learn social emotional skills as they're moving and growing and developing. And of course, safe routes to schools, depending on the state you're in the US, it differs. Some states you have coordinators at local levels, and some you have a state level funding different programs. So one of the things we've seen in the US, we had this in 2010 and 2012, and now it's had a resurgence in the US. It was modeled after a program in Barcelona, where the bike bus effort, similar to what you might say a walking school bus, but this is the bike bus. And so in Barcelona, it started off a PE coach in Portland, Oregon, Sam Belto, decided he'd start this with his school. He started off with about 20 kids. And then by the end of the year, he had 190 kids, 1/3 of the school riding bikes to school. And it's continued. I was able to ride with them back in April. And the one thing you see with a bike bus is so unique is not only the kids are having that social emotional interaction at the same time, but the community is out on the street cheering them on, which was phenomenal. There's one in Hood River, Oregon. Megan Ramey, who's the Safe Routes to Schools manager, runs that. Brooklyn, New York. This picture you have to the right, that's a 4-year-old riding on Brooklyn city streets with the bike bus. So kids can be in the bike bus at an earlier age. And then Arlington, Virginia, Jillian Burgess. So you see the different kind: PE teacher, Safe Routes to Schools manager, special ed teacher, parent advocate. We're trying to bring this across the US because it's a wonderful way to continue the bike effort. So once we teach them, educate them, what are you going to do to make sure we maintain that and reinforce that behavior? Bike buses are great. Sam Belto is actually he does it once a week. And now the students, several students are gathering to do their own bike bus on the other days. This is exactly what you want to see, that independent mobility. So this is the bike bus in Portland, Oregon.
What's your favorite part about the bike bus?
Well, getting a lot of exercise.
I like how that our parents are in there because they can rely on you to be more independent when you're doing it.
What do you say to the people who think it's too cold to bike during the winter?
That's your choice, but that's not mine.
What do you like the most about riding your bike?
The whole thing.
I like that everybody bikes as a community and it's for all ages.
Maybe also I just like that everybody likes to join, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about the bike bus is that it just gets you exercise for the start of the day, and then you get to go to school, and it's like you don't even have to play in the playground, and it always gets you there early.
It's fun to see your friends before school and hang out with them, doing an activity that's really fun. This is my outfit because you got to stay warm on your bike, or it's just gonna be a long ride. It gives you more energy and it makes you happier.
Do you know how many people watch the videos online and love the bike bus?
A lot.
Yeah. How does that make you feel?
Great.
I mean, yeah, it's really fun. I would do it every day if I could.
That's good with that one. And this is the bike bus actually coming down the hill. This is a phenomenal sight to see 190 kids coming down a hill. So thank you. But I think that the bigger part of what this whole effort is let's start bike education earlier. Let's find a way to get it in school so there's access and equity for kids in all areas. And because a lot of parents can't buy a bike, they may not have a place to store a bike. And then we have to do things with bike bus efforts in order for kids to have bikes so they can actually get out there and be more active as well. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes for questions.
Hi. Thank you so much for, presenting. It was really awesome to see how you had talked to programs from a lot of different places. I'm from Cycles of Change. This is me and Jerry. My name is Shruti, and my question was, you were talking about experimenting with your children and how the data kind of ends up supporting things that you know from your own experience and what you've observed.
Yes.
And how a lot of times, there's a lot of information that's communally held, but maybe there isn't enough, funding to have a perfect double-blind research project. So how do you navigate that in terms of getting data and doing things that are seen as scientifically reputable, but also being research that's actually supporting the community and kind of confirming what people know their needs are already. Does that question make sense?
Well, it makes sense. This is a great question. Given the age group we're working with is much more difficult to do some of the quantitative studies you'd like to do. So most of the work's been done is qualitative, but there is a need for a lot more research. Now, the balance bike research that was done by Dr. Messi and her colleagues was quantitative. She looked at how quickly kids would pick up cycling versus others, depending on what kind of bike they rode, training wheels versus a balance bike. So those are good quantitative studies that give us information. We're hoping for more funding in the U.S. because we don't have funding out there for looking at the bike buses, for example. Portland State was going to try to get funding to look at that. And as far as the traffic gardens, we haven't seen a lot of funding for that yet. It's mostly, again, qualitative or anecdotal. So I think it's a very valid question. I'm hoping some of the stuff we're seeing coming out of France soon, because they're putting $250 million into early childhood education, bike education. And some of the stuff that's happened in the UK, Ireland, and Scotland could do this as well. But right now there is a absence of quantitative type of information for us, that data that we need to do that. People are gathering information, but it's not the same level that you might see for middle school or high school.
Hi, Rick. It's Esther. I'll be up next, but I just wanted to follow up on that question. I think it's something we see a lot with working with community organizations across the country is, what strategies might you propose for organizations trying to apply for grants but might not have the backing of a local university, but have a lot of qualitative and interview data, or maybe less formal data. How might they be able to kind of roll that into applying for funding or something like that?
Great point. The traffic garden that we're installing in Dayton, Kentucky, right across the road from Cincinnati, was funded by the Governor's Highway Association, Safety Association. So that was a $25,000 grant to put that traffic garden in. Bikes were donated to the school because the school is only less than a quarter mile up from the park. And so we did initial survey data with the parents and the students about their bike activity, biking to school, biking for recreation, and captured that, and where they're feeling about safety in the built environment. And we're going to be able to replicate that and get a pre, and we're going to have a post to gather information coming forward. But that money was provided by the Governor's Highway Association in that case.
Hello. I'm fortunate to work at a school that's preschool through 8th grade. So this is super inspiring. I mean, granted, I'm just starting out, right? So now it's expanding the excitement of like, oh my gosh, I could have our preschoolers on bikes and we're doing buses and whatever. But how much is the range for a traffic garden? I mean, you said 25,000, but is there like a lower end version, like a bare minimum?
No, the 25,000 was for everything. It was that was for the bikes. We put in for the traffic garden. We were doing activities with the kids as part of the it's like a charrette we're going to do to introduce them to how do you develop or design the built environment. So we're going to do a lot of things with that $25,000. The traffic garden itself can range from anywhere from a pop-up that you do that's like $100 to a permanent one, which could be $5,000 to $100,000. The first one that was built in Seattle, I think was $100,000. They use thermoplastic on the playground, on the park. And so we have lots of asphalt in the US, so that's usually not a problem. Sometimes it is to resurface it, but the cost of the traffic garden itself really depends on local support. In Colorado, they had folks from the school system and local public works support them and donate time. Usually it's the labor of the installer and some of the materials that the cost. And so that's where depending on the collaboration of the community, that cost can be much lower depending on who's volunteering their time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. That's all the time we have for questions, but our next speaker is our very own Dr. Esther Walker.
All right. Thank you, Chaz. I promise I won't talk 100 words a minute to try to keep us on track, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, thank you all for, still being here kind of late in the day. I know after, a busy week for many of you here in person that, this is a lot of information to take in, and hopefully you're all kind of getting something you can take back to your communities. But as Chad said, my name is Esther Walker, and I work with the research and evaluation of programs at Outride. And while there are many different types of data that I could share today, sorry to many of you, I won't be talking about brains today, but hopefully you caught Luke's talk earlier. I really want to focus on another important topic, and that is really a broader evaluation of the Riding for Focus school education program, really understanding, what problems are teachers facing, what are the successes they see, and really how we can use that information to continually improve the support and development of that program. So I just wanted to start, I don't normally, pick a quote for the beginning, and I don't want to embarrass Mr. Glodek here, but the past 2 days, for those of you who are online or those who are, joining us anew, have been spent training the next cohort of Riding for Focus educators from across the country. And this has been really, really, really inspiring. Just hearing their experiences, both, champions that have been implementing for 5-10 years, cycling education programs, to those who maybe have just got on a bike for the first time in a few years and are now preparing to teach it to, middle schoolers. And so I'd like to just start here with a quote by John, and I think it really speaks to the power of the bike as a tool, not only for physical health, which is, I think, a theme that we've seen here today, but also that really deep potential to support our overall well-being. And of course, I'm not drawing this whole experience from just the quote or, how we all feel we relate to the bike. We know it from all of the research that is out there, all of the community knowledge that we've experienced. And so I don't need to, reiterate all the many benefits, of being active, whether it's, going for a bike ride or a hike. But we know that it goes beyond physical health. And we know that it has deep, deep potential to impact our mental health, which is really important given the current situation that we see facing our youth across the country. And so one really great activity, I'm sure you'll all agree with me because we're all here today, is bicycling. Bicycling really has the potential to support youth to be active. And a theme that I've heard over and over again across these presentations, and I know, Kim had just mentioned it to me as well, is fun. This program, not just the program, but biking is really fun for students. It can be used for recreation, for transportation, alone, with friends, and throughout the entire lifespan. However, what we do see across the country, and not just in the US, is that bicycling participation among youth is dropping. And this participation continues to drop for many different reasons. But one key reason is that, many students, even by the time they hit middle school, aren't learning how to ride. I think gone are the days where it's just like, oh, you just find a bike in the neighborhood and, try to figure it out and go off with your friends. It's clear that not everyone has access to bikes or safe places to ride. And systemic disparities, persist in infrastructure, in opportunity, with underserved communities really facing kind of those greatest disparities. So we've seen across our data that, gender, race, socioeconomic status, all really impact, whether someone has access to a bike at home, access to programming, access to safe places to ride, ultimately contributing to riding frequency. And so for us, I think, it's really important to understand that one really important place that students can all be introduced to the basics of cycling and have that opportunity is at school. They could have access to equipment, a safe environment to learn, and peer support. So here it really provides that opportunity to introduce bikes as that tool for, mobility, for freedom, and really encourage that lifelong love of physical activity. And so many of you are familiar with the Riding for Focus program. Many of you are about to embark on your own journeys implementing the program across the country. But for those of you who are not familiar, it is our middle school cycling education program, often implemented during physical education units. And at the lowest level, it's really just focused on equipping students with basic cycling handling and traffic safety skills. And so the emphasis here is really on providing students with that base level of understanding to become safe and confident cyclists. The program is made up of 12 progressive modules. Many of you experienced that out in the parking lot the other day. Designed to be implemented over, say approximately 6 to 8 weeks. And so students really have the chance to get comfortable with biking, learn critical safety skills, and build that physical literacy of biking. So it's not just a 1 hour show up and leave. They really get that time to practice and feel it out. And as part of this program, we do a lot of regular data collection and evaluation and research, not just myself, but with a wide network of academic partners. And so today I'd like to just introduce you to one project we've been working on, which is an evaluation of all of this Riding for Focus data we've collected over years, not just from the students, but also from the teachers, as well as a lot of our historical program data. And so I'd like to start by introducing you to the framework I'm going to walk us through today, which is the RE-AIM framework. And this is really just a useful framework to translate a lot of that research that's been done into practice, and really to help us understand key elements to ensure program success and program impact. And so, though this kind of data collection may lead to various questions we want to answer, today I'm going to keep it pretty high level, walk through each of these. I might skip through some depending on time. But ultimately, there's key questions anytime you're implementing a program. The first one being, who are we reaching? We know that there are disparities in access to programming, to safe places to ride. Are we really reaching the schools and the communities that might really want to give their students opportunities to learn how to ride a bike? In terms of effectiveness, is the program working as it was designed? So we aim to teach young people to ride, safely and confidently, to foster a lifelong love of physical activity, to support their mental well-being. Is that happening? We also train teachers to implement it in a certain way, progressive skills, not being, as we heard in that first presentation, that pro-level coach yelling at students on the sideline. We really want to foster that, positive environment, a learning environment for them all. And then another key one is, what are the long-term impacts of the program, both on a school level as well as an individual level? So to actually, capture some of this information, it's a lot of data wrangling, and it's not perfect, and it's a bit of a mixed methods approach. But throughout the program, we gather, from a number of sources what is happening from both a student perspective, a teacher perspective, as well as kind of our own tracking data of, when schools are struggling and, may need to drop out. How can we support them? Or are they just, have decided that at this time it's not for them? So if we start with reach here, due to time, I'm not going to go to all the details here. But you can see here that we're pretty widespread across the US and with a little sprinkle in Canada. We have a pretty good mix of urban, suburban, and rural schools. And I think we actually did that exercise yesterday with this new cohort of the division amongst the three. And these program grants are prioritized for Title I schools and schools serving communities with a large proportion of free and reduced lunch rates. In terms of demographics, just a quick distribution for gender for this previous school year. What I think is really important here is that we're really reaching the school population. And you can contrast this with many bicycling specific programs that often struggle to recruit non-male students. And so, often those programs might set a benchmark of 10%, 20%, 30%. So what this is showing is really at school level provides a critical place to really provide access to biking for all students. And in terms of racial demographics, here we can see trends from the 2019 cohort, well, not the cohort, but all of the schools participating 2019-2020 compared to 21-22, compared to the US population of under 18. And what we see here is kind of a shift year over year of the becoming more representative of the US population, though there's still a lot of work to do there. And I will add that the goal isn't necessarily to 100% reflect that, but to ultimately really reach the students who could most benefit from this programming. So in terms of effectiveness, this is always the one everyone's waiting for. They want to know, what happened. And I don't want to spoil this so much because I have presented on this before. I've written up some of the results on a white paper that's on our website here, and the results are largely the same in terms of, students have fun, they enjoy it, they're learning to ride. I also don't want to spoil the punchline for our presenters in the back here who will follow up as doing an independent, separate project looking at some of this data. So due to time constraints, I'm really just going to focus in on one that I haven't talked a lot about before, being safety. And so here, I think what's really interesting to see for across both the students and the teachers, there's really high perceptions of them feeling that they're feeling equipped and learning how to ride safely through this program. And I just want to point out this last stat here is that, this is actually, instead of just, their perception, this is now the change in percentage of students who report wearing helmets very often or always, pre to post the program. And what we actually see is this pretty low number, 30%, going up to 50%, still not super high, but that almost 20% shift is actually really positive in terms of helping to shape student perceptions of safety. And apologies for any Europeans on there. I know they'll take me into a whole helmet, sidetrack, but I think it is a really good indicator of kind of the speaking to the potential of this program to really help embed that information into our students. I'm going to skip adoption, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to maintenance. But in terms of implementation, again, this is the question of what does the program look like at schools? Are they doing what the program is designed to do? And what we see here is just at a really high level. It's really coming close to our recommended, 6 weeks, 3 times a week, at least 20 minutes of ride time, so probably a 40, 50-minute class. And so what we can also see is that many students become fully adopted into this program. They're implementing not just one class a year, but maybe 5 sections or more throughout their whole school day, truly giving access to all their students, both in the fall and the spring potentials. For those of you just coming in to teach, don't feel overwhelmed. Start small and see how it goes. Other questions around implementation, I think not a surprise. It's mostly implemented as a PE unit at schools. It's how the program was initially designed. But recognizing that those limitations on physical education schedules across the country, with many being cut, other schools have adapted. They've created their own unit. They've integrated into health and wellness. They've adapted into an after-school program. So really kind of working with the different district and state policies. That if you don't have PE accessible, how can you still introduce this to your students? And in terms of where students ride, I think remember this is about getting students up to speed with basic skills. It's not jumping into Red Bull Rampage. So many just use what they have available. That could be the school parking lot. It could be the running track. It could be a grass field. And if you're lucky enough to have those trails and paved paths around you, I think students get really excited about engaging with those as well. And then this one, I know this is the big scary graph with all the bars, but this one is actually really informative to us. So this is about implementation fidelity. So if we look at all of the key themes of the skills that students are learning, how are the schools actually, implementing that in practice? It's one thing to say, here's your curriculum, go follow it. But we all know that we have different needs. Our communities, may respond to different ways. Students may be stuck on level 3 for 4 weeks, and that's what we can do. And so I think a few key things here is that the first 3 lessons tend to be the most highly implemented. Those are the basic skills, really getting everyone up to speed. Lesson 5, heart rate, seems to either be the highest rates of omission or the most adaptations, often because this is already taught in other units or they're integrating it with another lesson. And then as we kind of go into the more kind of advanced skills here, we see some drop off and some modification. Not that they necessarily don't do it, but maybe their students, again, are still focusing in on the first 4 skills. Maybe they run out of time. We are across the country, so maybe weather gets bad. You're implementing in the fall and it's a race against winter. Maybe you're implementing in the spring and it's a race against heat. So this feedback is really important information for us to receive from the schools in order to understand what adaptations and modifications are being made to suit their particular students and their environment. So keep it up. So for all the teachers here in the audience, this isn't just go rogue. It's just, we understand you will need to adapt, and we love to hear in which ways you do that. And then finally, for maintenance, huge shout out to Nick here for his support on this part of the project. And what we see actually is, this program has been running from 2012, and we actually had the original champion here, J.O., who had to leave early, but it was incredible to hear about their experiences. And we have 79% of the schools still implementing from those earlier cohorts. And this is actually a pretty impressive number despite going through COVID. And as you move on to those more recent cohorts, so 2019, 2020, 2021, this number becomes much, much higher. And actually, what I want to nuance here is that many of these schools that had reported stopping had expressed interest in actually reaching back out with us, learning how they could get the program started again. Whether that was, there had been huge teacher turnover due to COVID, whether they have lost support with a local bike shop. So there's many ways they could work to get started up again by kind of reconnecting with the Outride community. On the flip side, I think we've seen some really, really powerful ways that this program has been expanded. So wonderful things happening at schools across the country, from adding after school bike clubs, adding standalone bike programs in their school, adding bike repair classes to be able to then help them become more sustainable programs in order to support that. Community events, and even adding trails or bike parks around the school so that students have somewhere safe to ride. All right, so in summary, I hope I didn't go way over. Maybe Chaz can play the music if it's a little too long. But so in summary, I think we're reaching a lot more schools, but it's not perfect, and we'll talk a little bit about the challenges. In terms of effectiveness, it's really introducing students to that base level kind of safe cycling education. And again, I'll hear a lot more from Starla and Fletcher in a moment. Mostly implemented as designed, but again, we're continuing to learn how it's been adapted and how we can share that information with other communities who may be facing the same challenges. Again, I don't want to pretend it's not without its challenges. Implementing a bike program is hard. Implementing with 30 students with all of their bikes at once is hard. And I think, it really kind of a theme here is that it really requires the support of the larger school community. So administration buy-in, mitigating teacher turnover and teacher bandwidth, bike maintenance, disparities in skill levels. And for all of us, I think at Outride, we see this information, and it's really got our wheels spinning in terms of like, how do we adapt to, meet these needs in terms of considering after school options, piloting, working with nonprofits to support the programming. We also know teachers, they need a lot of support, especially, post-COVID. So training, resources, support of their administration and community. And then another key thing I'll move on here is kind of this larger theme of really the importance of community. We heard it all through teacher training. I think we've heard it a lot in the presentations today. But starting, schools in one thing, starting biking in schools is one thing, but the hard work is really building those community relationships that allow these types of programs to flourish and students to really experience pathways for cycling well beyond the school day. So my question for you here is, who can you work with in your community to really help support those connections, and how can we support you? So thank you.